I love the saying, you can never get enough of what you don't want, because that is the way life guides you to heal your soul. It gives you destructive relationships, it gives you shitty experiences, it gives you all these things. So you look inside, and you heal those parts of yourself that were wounded in that early level of adversity that you experienced.
Please note, the content of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. This episode comes with a content warning. This episode contains information that might be triggering for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. This episode also contains explicit language.
Jason Shiers, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So there's a lot that I love about your current philosophies. And one of the things that you say is that change is not hard. It's actually really simple. And once we get insight into how the mind works, it's actually our conditioning that makes us believe it's challenging. Yeah. So your journey to get to that insight, though, was far from simple. So would you be able to take us back and just share the story of how you came to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's paradoxical, me saying that, considering I had what you might call a complex journey, I mean, the journey was very long. I mean, we could talk for hours about childhood trauma, about eating disorders, about addictions, about mental health stuff. It's like, my father was killed in an accident. He went out, he didn't come back. I turned to food as a coping mechanism because nobody knew what to do with grief. It wasn't like there's a parental book for helping 5-year-olds with grief, like that. Nobody knew that. My mum didn't know that. I didn't know that. And everybody did the best they could, which wasn't very good. We all did the best we could, but none of it was good. What I got was not good, and what I gave was not good, So food became my coping mechanism, my comfort, my peace of mind, my escape, from being me, which was painful, but I didn't know. I didn't know it was painful. It was just being me, Like, how did I have any comparison? What did I know? What did I know of the life of a 5-year-old who hadn't lost his dad? I didn't know nothing of that, I just knew the life that I had. And I escaped, and I didn't know why I escaped, but I just enjoyed escaping, Looking back now, it makes complete sense. But then I was just in it, so I was clueless, I have a friend, 2 friends who are twins, and they often tell the story of saying, people ask them, what's it like to be a twin? And the answer is, well, what's it like not to be a twin? And that's the same thing that I'm talking about here. I don't know anything other than what I lived, so I don't know how I could have seen anything different. And the chaos got worse, the eating and the escapism got worse, and the avoidance of self got worse. Crime became a thing at a very young age, even petty crime to start with, stealing bikes, stealing out of gardens, stealing not much valuable stuff, but just the start of escapism in that way. Being entered into the mental health system at 10 years old with a diagnosis and medication for depression, and sort of passed around the psychiatric system to different people. This was 1980. There was no internet like there is today. There was not the commonly shared information. There was not a real childhood trauma was not really a thing then, It's kind of like really everything was just given from a medical point of view, using the medical model. People were given diagnosis and they were given treatment for their diagnosis. That's kind of how you looked at it. Or there was talking therapies. And for whatever reason, I ended up in the psychiatric system. And then it was just more chaos, more crime. As I got older, got into heavier crimes, got into different things, gangs and organized stuff and crazy things for drugs, all for drugs from a young teenager. Heroin was the first drug I took at a very young age. And, and just a continued road to escapism from myself. There was no real respite. I went to rehab when I was 23 only because it was in the town where I lived, around the corner, and I thought I had a physical issue that needed to be detoxed. That's all I knew of addiction treatment, of mental health. I just lived in it. I didn't know anything of it until obviously now my later years as a professional is where I kind of learned and made sense of my own life in that learning process, you know. And then there's been a long kind of period of decades of working in the field, of becoming a professional and being on my own personal journey, like 30 years this year since I stopped my addiction, you know, and since I stopped my addiction with drugs and alcohol, but like many years afterwards of indulgence in process addictions, in behavioral addictions, in different forms of addictions, and in escapism that's socially acceptable, you know, in any way of getting away from self, because I no longer had the coping mechanism of drugs and alcohol because there was too much destruction that came with it, you know.
And were you aware that the cycle of addiction was continuing just in different forms, or are you only aware of that now looking back?
It's interesting. I'm aware of it in a different way now to what I was. You know, like I knew because I went to multiple 12-step fellowships. I went to Overeaters Anonymous, I went to Gamblers Anonymous, I went to Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, and I went to Narcotics Anonymous, you know. So I kind of knew that there was other addictions. I didn't understand it in the way I do today, you know, and it was like, I guess there was something about it that never felt right, that I had to go to so many fellowships to treat this apparently killer disease that I had. You know, it's kind of like as out of fear, you know, like fear of relapse, fear of going back, fear of self-destruction, fear of annihilation, you know, like, so I did all those things, but as I'm aware of it today, you know, like there's just addiction. There are different manifestations of addiction, but they're highly irrelevant and not even worth talking about in the process of treatment, you know?
Yeah. And what would you say the moment of big change was?
One moment or many moments. There's been many moments of realization, many moments of transformation, many moments of change, you know. I don't really see it as this kind of linear progressive scale where there's okay and not okay. You know, it's kind of like there is moment to moment experience, you know, and that's all there is. It's ever changing and it's completely transient. It just flows up and down, you know, at all times. So, I mean, like stopping taking drugs was a big part of things, and alcohol, and then further realizations, you know, spiritual insights, awakenings, and so on, to beliefs, you know, to ideas about self, to what relationships had been about my whole life. You know, they'd been about safety and not about love, you know, and probably through the loss of my dad, I just picked safe relationships that were loveless, you know, because love was a scary thing, because it took me back to that place of terror of losing somebody. So there's been so many different realizations, so many different awakenings to different levels, you know, awakenings of consciousness, like just different changes in perspective of myself, and awakenings that led to change in behavior, awakenings that led to changes in my practice as a therapist, you know, to no longer being able to practice in a certain way because of realizations I'd had about myself, you know.
Mm. So how do you go from that to going, change is easy? It's really simple. What is your philosophy now and your orientation around change? Because it is one of the hardest things, and it's one of the places where we get stuck the most.
Yeah, like one of the realizations, one of the awakenings was that I have been lost in a prison of my own making for my whole life, you know, and actually the insight that I had, the realization of that I have been lost in a prison of my own making, was simple. It came about in a momentary experience, and it changed my life completely, you know. So that was a very simple insight, like what it takes you to get to that place of being ready to receive or hear that insight, you know, may well be different for each one of us, you know, but I don't think that anyone can dictate or state the conditions that are necessary for insight. You know, we can create a space that's conducive to having insights. Could be relaxed, non-academic, letting the filter of the mind slow down, slowing the conversation down, being very present, you know, and so on. So we're creating the space for the potential of insight, but we can't create insight for people. And everyone will be somewhere unique on their own journey and within themselves, their own mind. For example, many people that come to me at the start, they're just looking outside of them. Oh, my relationship's not going well and I haven't got enough money and I need a new job and a new career and I need to lose some weight. It's kind of, that's what they want, but like then on the flip side of that, someone who'd had some sort of realization might be saying that what happens inside of me, in relation to what is outside of me is what I need to look at. It's like, because what happens inside of me is difficult, it's challenging, it's painful. That's a complete paradigm shift in where somebody's looking for the answer. If somebody's looking outside themselves, I just need more money, then I'll be okay. I just need a better relationship, then I'll be okay. That's a distant, if it's not true distance, but like metaphorically, it's a distant starting point to having that deeper internal realization or insight that I had,
Yeah. So how did you go, though, from the insight of, like, our mind can be a prison to then actually implementing what is required in those next steps? Would you say that is challenging? Because we can understand the concepts, but to put it into practice can be a huge adjustment.
Well, like, firstly, let's kind of look at this conversation right now between me and you, because everything that I do is experiential. So I have to be in the moment, right? Like, you're asking me the question, how do you go from this, right? And that's a mind-based question. And like most times when people come, they're like, okay, so just tell me like 1, 2, and 3, what I need to do, and then I'll just do it. And then obviously I'll get what you've got, right? And I'm like, no, it doesn't come that way. It's like, we have to actually let go of that part of us that wants to ask the question, how? Because that is what I call the onboard computer, which is very good at spreadsheets, working out.
No, I'm not good at spreadsheets, just to clarify.
It's good at knowing you've got the right money in your pocket. It's good at paying for things. It's good at calculating stuff, at working out your taxes, your banking. It's absolutely terrible as a tool to understand transformation because it can't compute. It's not a computable thing. It's an experiential, and it involves the psychological, the spiritual, the holistic approach to being human, whereas this is literally just a binary computer, So using your question as that example, it's like we have to relax from that, and kind of start to see that there's more to us than that, just that brain, just that mind,
Yeah. Wow. Boof, boof. Whoa. In fact, that was like a microtherapy session in an answer. You're good. Yeah. So you now integrate a psychodynamic and somatic approach with a spiritual understanding of non-duality. Can you please explain that in its entirety and its magic?
Yeah. Wow. That's a cool question. Like...
Hey, I had to give you a good one to make up for the last one.
Yeah. Well, that realization that I talked about, that realization that life is happening inside of me, not outside of me. It is an internal experience. I don't experience the outside world. I experience my perception of the outside world. That doesn't mean that there aren't people that are not so favorable, let's just say, people that annoy me, people that irritate me. There are. But I'm aware that what I'm experiencing is my internal perspective, not directly these people. Non-duality means not two, so the first realization is that everything is all one. I'm just experiencing the internal world of myself at all times. In fact, this is quite mind-blowing if you really sit, and think about it. It's like nothing else exists but your own internal world. People don't even exist, really. I mean, in the absolute, it's true, but in the relative, there's me and you here having a conversation, so of course we exist. So it's really like my trips into non-duality and kind of understanding the spiritual are then coupled with my somatic work and my understanding of the relative experience of being human. So you've got the absolute truth, which is there's just me experiencing myself, as consciousness, as one, and everything is one. Everything is completely part of the same. It's not my consciousness and your consciousness. It's just consciousness. We are just experiencing ourselves. That's how it works to be human. But then in the relative experience of being me, and this is where I separate from traditional spiritual teachers and traditional somatic teachers. They tend to be in one camp or the other, and I feel like I operate in both, and I include both. There is the relative experience of being human, being a conditioned, body, so to speak, that is biologically wired for survival and has a trauma response mechanism called the autonomic nervous system that shows up as tension, as contraction, as constriction in my human life in relation to stimulus, that I am perceiving, that is not actually affecting me, but I am affected by it. I'm having a real experience, but it's through perception. So taking those and my years in as a psychotherapist, and kind of molding together an in-the-moment experience for people where we show up in the present moment relationally in a therapeutic setting, and we see what shows up from there, and people sometimes want something, sometimes something will happen in the moment. I mean, we could just do a somatic investigation and I'd say, I feel a tightness in my throat, and we could just go straight into that, Or people might want a philosophical kind of reflection. They might ask the question, which is a very common question in non-duality, which is, who am I? And we can reflect. And I call it transformative conversations, because by reflecting on who am I, and somebody might say, well, I'm 52 years old. I go, yeah, but last year you were 51. So that's not your identity, right? They'll give their name and I'll go, but you didn't have a name when you were born, and they go, well, it's me. I go, well, what do you mean by me? It's like, are you the body? No, I'm not the body. I'm not my job title. I'm not my status. I'm not my sibling status. I'm not my relationship status. I'm not my parental status. So once you've eliminated all these things, people start to go, oh, yeah, what am I? It's kind of like, well, I'm this character or personality, then, okay, then, so if I cut you open, like with a scalpel, will we find any personality in there? Nope. Will we find a character in there? Nope. Okay. So it's just this process of elimination and kind of realizing what's not true to start to question what is true. It's like a gradual and progressive, deeper realization. So it's different ways, and there's not a linear approach to this. Some people are really somatic. They're in the body. They feel a lot of tension and contraction and so on. Some people are philosophical and they prefer the philosophical conversation. Some people are stuck in their heads and they need to be in their body. It's always different, but like molding together these understandings that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. There is an absolute truth, but we're never going to transcend being human. So we're always going to live in the relative experience of being me. And suffering is fundamentally founded in the belief in separation. I believe myself to be a separate human being, carrying the weight and responsibility of my own well-being, which is not true. It's kind of like, but it just looks true to a separate human being. But relieving them of that, I don't relieve them of it. They relieve themselves of it. I for simple terms, sometimes call myself like a tour guide. I'm just going to point to some stuff, and it's up to you if you look at it. I'm not transforming anybody. We create a space together, and people have transformational experiences. That's how I see it.
Awesome. Was this knowing always inside of you but blocked, or is it something that you came to that ended up being your salvation?
Yeah, that's why I say I'm not giving anything to anybody, because they already know it, and I already knew it, and it is blocked, like you said. If you think about like where everybody wants to get to, they want to get to more love, more peace of mind, more happiness, right? And every single desire, right, that anyone has, no matter if it's I want to build $1 million company, I want to make $1 million decision, I want to lose weight, I want a new girlfriend, everything. If you ask why, until you can't get to the end, until you can't get any further, the end of that investigation is always going to be happiness, peace of mind. That's it. That's why anybody wants anything. So if you think about that desire, it's kind of like that's inherently already existing in people, what they want, happiness and contentment. How many children, like do you see playing in the sand, that don't know how to be content or happy or play or be present with each other? How many children do you know that have barriers of sexuality or color or creed or religion? They don't exist for children, right? Children don't say, well, I don't like the color of the skin of this other child, so I'm not going to play with them. They're just there in the moment together. They're joyful. They know how to play. They know how to be present. They know how to have all those things that human being wants, because they already exist inside of them. They're not like, you don't have to learn those things. But what's happened is like after you were born and you were very innocently indoctrinated and conditioned into the human societal system, and you were taught about separation. You were taught that you are separate. You were taught that love is conditional, right and wrong, good and bad. Yes, that's okay. No, don't do that. Oh, I don't like the no, cold and prickly because I don't get love, so I'll behave this way. So love is conditional. I'm separate to you, to my parent, to my caregiver, and I have to do things in order to be okay. So based on the level of adversity, like it could be lack of love, lack of presence, criticism, shame received, or it could be on the opposite end of the scale, violence, abuse, could be any of those things. I create myself as a separate human being, with beliefs and ideas, and based on that level of adversity that I've been witness to, based on the ego structure that I create about myself, and how much suffering is potentially involved for that particular character that I think I am in the movie playing in my own mind, So that's really what's going on in that creation. I've got a little bit lost. I can't remember the question you asked me.
I can't remember either. I'm just thinking about how many times someone would sit down for a session with you and you're just like, why? How many times do you say why in a day?
Yeah, well,
I love it because it is like you just keep going and going and going and going, and ultimately you get to a truth.
Let me finish because I remembered now, because you asked about, we're talking about what people want and kind of like how we go from having that thing.
Yeah.
And you talked about, am I uncovering something or am I teaching somebody something new? So people already know happiness and contentment and joy. It's there. It's already within them. And then all this conditioning and this creation of separation, belief in separation, and creating the character that I think I need to be in order to be okay, because that's what's going on in the world. Like everyone's, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's kind of like, oh, I want to be a doctor. I want to be a lawyer or something because I need money to live because of this conditioned society and all these things that happen in the conditioning. Then become like the forefront or the most important part. I'm separate being and it's up to me to make it in this world. It's kind of like, and life becomes all serious and all that stuff that exists in the simplicity of just being as a child, happiness, contentment, joy, peace of mind, gets suppressed, gets squashed down, gets left by the wayside. People will say things like, oh, don't have time for friends, don't have time for relationship, too busy in my life, and so on. So nobody needs to be taught those things. What people really need is, what I say about my work is, it's undoing rather than doing. It's unlearning rather than learning. It's slowing down rather than speeding up,
Yeah.
It's all those things to realize that which is already true.
Yeah, wow. It's like coming to see you would be sitting down with a philosopher. Do people, what are the reactions? Like, do you just get like so many mind blown moments? And does it land fast? Because it is an innate truth.
Yeah, I'm looking for that in people, I'm asking people what landed with you there and helping people, because quite often they don't understand when they've had an insight, or they can't, like, they hear something and they go, oh, that sounds true, and I'm like asking people about, like, what does resonance mean? Like, what does the feeling of resonance mean? Oh, that resonates for me, that fits for me, It's like, what it means is that I recognize something in myself there. I recognize a truth. I recognize something that is true, because I'm quite often repeating to people, don't listen to me. I don't want you to follow me. I don't want you to believe me. I don't want you to think this is a new ideology or a new idea or belief. I don't hold any answers whatsoever. All I'm really doing is guiding you to trust in yourself and know yourself and become reconnected to yourself. And you know everything more than me. You know everything about yourself more than I do. So my only job, as I see it, is helping you to see and reconnect to that which is already true. So like helping people see in resonance. Resonance means I've had an insight, a sight from inside, something that's already true for me that I just perhaps had forgotten or covered over with shit, basically,
Yeah. Yeah, to put it glamorously. What's your advice for people who are struggling with self-destructive behaviours?
See, that's a completely different paradigm question, Like,
I know we've just gone from flowers and sunshine.
Yeah, it's good that you ask. And it's a common thing that people ask, what's 3 tips that you could give somebody who's struggling with addiction? I've no idea. I don't know, because it's like I'm talking about one paradigm and you're asking about another, and the way that I'm working with people is behaviorally, like let's say they've got destructive behavior, that's painful for them. Well, that's an escapism. That's what I would call a coping mechanism for internal dis-ease. It's a pain reliever, possibly, it's a pain coper. It copes with pain, copes with internal dis-ease. Now, first of all, to see it differently, right? In the paradigm that you're talking about, that is a pathology, it's like it's something that's wrong with somebody. It's something going on because there's something wrong with them. It might even take somebody to a mental health diagnosis. It certainly would take them to a therapist. It might take close relatives to being concerned if they were doing a particular type of destructive behavior. In the paradigm where I'm separate, you're separate, and things are broken and need fixing. What I'm saying is, let's move our perspective and look at things differently. I'm a non-pathologizing approach. So like, I don't come up with labels. I don't subscribe to those things because I think they're just misunderstandings. They're part of the bigger common narrative that's just basically, So how can we see it differently? Like when somebody's having destructive behavior, well, it makes complete sense. If they're having internal dis-ease, then finding a coping mechanism, makes complete sense. This is a self-correcting system, like everything in nature is. It has a cycle. It works a certain way. The leaves fall off the trees, they come back, they reproduce, and so on and stuff like that. Like nature works. Human being doesn't make sense that we were described faultily, with bits that were broken and didn't work. So it makes sense to look at things from an intelligence point of view. And in that paradigm, destructive behavior is an alarm clock from the soul. It's like saying, okay then, so I got destructive behavior going on, then what do I need to do? Well, then I need to look deeper. What is this alarm clock from my soul trying to tell me? What does it want me to see? What does it want me to look at? And that's the beautiful thing about life as an intelligence, that life will guide you to heal your soul. I love the saying, you can never get enough of what you don't want, because that is the way life guides you to heal your soul. It gives you destructive relationships, it gives you shitty experiences, gives you all these things. So you look inside, and you heal those parts of yourself that were wounded in that early level of adversity that you experienced in childhood, So it's
so every step is a step back to ourselves.
Yeah, it's a long answer to your question, but like what I'm really saying is, look at it, maybe find a different question or ask it with a different intention. It's like, yeah, it's okay to understand like what's something we can do with somebody with destructive behavior. Well, like it wouldn't be the typical answer, like, of course, make sure if you're doing destructive behaviors that are dangerous to your life, try and be safe, tell people about it. It's kind of like, depending on what the behaviors are, take care of yourself the best you can in that situation, but also learn something about yourself, like what's really going on inside myself. Quite often there's a disconnection from self, there's a somatic tension playing out, there's something happening that we're unaware of, and all of it is a calling inside, so it's calling you inside. There's part of you that needs your love and attention.
So how about I reorient the question? If we get distracted by anything or caught up in our own mind, what's the best way to always come back to our essence? Is that a better question?
That's a different question, but yeah, I mean, it's relevant. It's kind of like everyone will have their unique thing, like for some people, walking in nature, for some people, the sea, the sound of the sea, for other people, drawing, creating, painting, it's kind of like for some people, meditation, different things for different people. And there is no best way, but there is your way, your way that works for you. And I'm not saying, I want to be clear that I'm not talking about transcendence, that there's no way to just consistently come back to your true self and just be free of all or live in a blissful state. Like you will experience the roller coaster of life, but you just learn to ride it more gracefully.
Yeah. What do you know, having gone through addiction and recovery, that most people don't know? Or what are you grateful for that most people wouldn't even have an appreciation of? I should say not most, many, possibly.
Yeah. The thing that I know that is essential that a lot of people don't know is that life is an inside-out experience. Now, many people, if you talk about that, I get people. I was just watching a podcast back with somebody else, and everything I said, they were going, "Yeah, yeah, yeah," as if they knew, And when felt quite irritated when I was watching it back, because I'm certain that this person had no clue what I was talking about, and that. Many people will know, yeah, I know life is an inside-out experience, but trust me, when you know, your life will change. That's how you know if you know. It's a mind-blown realization. Now, the intellect, the head, what goes on in the brain, the computer, can get that. It can go, yeah, that's good, yeah, great. And what next? I'm going, I've just told you something that's profound and life-changing, and you just go, yeah, okay, then I know you haven't received it fully. It hasn't downloaded yet. So you might know something in your head, but if it hasn't blown your mind, you don't really know it yet.
Which circles right back to the idea that you understanding that life is actually really simple. How do you actually take that from it dropping in to actually, embracing it and embodying it?
Yeah. Well, in one of my podcasts about listening, the lady that was on it talked about listening with a willingness to be impacted. So that's like relaxing your analytical, your brain, the computer, and kind of being willing to consider what's being said, in a deeper, more introspective way. Like, how could that be true? Not to come to conclusions. Conclusions are of the mind, they're of the computer. Like, the mind needs conclusions, it needs to know 1 and 1 plus 2, 1 and 1 equals 2, So questions without conclusions, like my life is an inside-out experience, it's going to be a forever uncovering experience, it's going to be mind-blowing, and then it's going to keep going, it's an endless insight. So just to keep considering that with a willingness to be impacted, that's an essential part of, like, when you listen to this conversation, like, am I really willing to be impacted by this, or am I just going, yeah, I know, what's next, yeah, I know, yeah, I know that, yeah, of course I know that, it's like that, I get people like that, and I ask them, like, what do you know? How do you know? And that.
Why?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Do you have any moments where, like, the other paradigm tempts you to come back in, where your mind wants to overthink, or are you always like yogi centered?
No, I'm
namaste.
When I first had this experience, I thought if I really understood this properly, I would live more spiritually, I would float around in the lowest position, all, peaceful and stuff. But these days, I'm very unapologetically human, and I don't give so much.
So cool.
I don't give so much of a shit about being human, I don't think because I do the work that I do, or because I share the stuff that I share, that should somehow make me, like, blissful and so on, I don't do destructive things to myself anymore, I feel content with who I am, I can look at myself in the mirror in a good way, it's like I don't have internal narrative of any destructive way whatsoever, but there's still my heart is still tender, my sensitivity which is a trauma response, a highly sensitive is still there. So I'm learning to live with a tender heart, on a daily basis, and to be authentically me as I show up without the influence or care of the outside world, because I realize that's irrelevant nonsense. So that's an ongoing journey for everyone. And I'm continue to do work on myself, continue to do somatic investigations into trauma stuff, different, different levels. There's different levels of awareness of self. There's different places of somatic tension and contraction and constriction that show up that are completely unconscious, So always be as I say it, always be a student, of your own life, and never come to a point of feeling like, I'm cured now, because I'm definitely not cured,
And to wrap up, I would love to ask you, what brings you the most joy when you work with your clients?
So, I have so many beautiful moments, So it has to be that. It has to be the the feeling I get of presence with another human being waking up to the realization that they're okay, or they have some sort of realization that changes their life, and I just sit in that present moment with somebody. That's a very, very touching, and beyond anything really I could put into words that would explain it well enough so you could understand it. So you're just going to have to take my word for it, that it's a very touching and very beautiful and heartwarming and feeling of aliveness, to be with somebody. I mean, Sid Banks was a guy that I listened to a lot years ago, and one of the things he said was, we've got the best job in the world. We get to tap people on the shoulder and be with them as they wake up, and while I don't fully subscribe to that, the way he said it, it's kind of somewhat like that,
That's awesome. What a beautiful way to wrap up. Thank you so much for the gift of your presence and your amazing insights today. And I'm so happy that I didn't say yes, 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 yes. But I will be asking why.
It's good. Yeah, it's good to wonder about those things,
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.